Hey, this is Digital Stereo Guitar. Today we're going to be talking about how to make yourself a pedal snake. So you may be a guitarist, you may be a bass player, and you've got a number of cables, you've got power cables, you've got guitar leads, all running between your guitar, perhaps through pedals, to your amplifier, to different power, distribution units, to power boards, or whatever it may be. And you want to somehow combine all of these together. You can go online or go to a music store and buy yourself a pedal snake or get somebody to make one for you, but it's going to cost you a lot more money. But you can actually make one yourself very, very easy, very, very cheap, and you don't need a lot of stuff. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be running two 5-meter long guitar leads, and I've got a couple of DC power extension cables that I'm going to be using to extend essentially the power units that are on my pedal board, and then running into separate power boards that I've got available near where my amplifier and all the other equipment is based. So I went online, I went to eBay and looked for this thing right here. This is expandable braided cable sleeving. This is the main body of the pedal snake. All of my cables and leads are going to be running through here. You'll see that it actually extends, so it expands as I'm running all my cables through, so it actually makes it quite easy to run multiple cables through. This is very, very cheap. You can buy it in different lengths. And essentially what I did is I measured the length of my, my guitar leads, and I started from there and then bought this based around the length of my guitar leads. You can then, of course, go and cut this to size if you buy a little bit extra. I would recommend buying a little bit extra so that you can cut it down if you so need to. I've got two guitar leads right here. So my guitar, I've got my standard input into my guitar running into the input on my pedal board, and then out of my pedal board, I'm running stereo, hence the two cables that are going to be running into two different destination locations, whether that be two different amplifiers or whether that be into DIs or whatever the end destination is for your guitar lead. That's why I've got two. It may be a good idea to run more than two. You could perhaps run 3 or 4 depending on the expandable nature of your actual cable sleeving. Next to that is a couple of these. I've got DC powered one-spot power adapters, which have got ample power to be able to power all of my pedal boards across different voltages. I've got 2 of those, hence 2 of these DC extender cables. Very similar if you have a DC brick or multiple DC bricks or something similar to that on your power board for powering your entire unit. You could run something similar to this or run a standard longer kettle cable, which you can also buy off eBay on the very, very cheap end. These 2 were also bought on eBay for very, very cheap, and I've bought them to the length so that they are the same length as my guitar cables. And then finally, some of this heat shrink wrapping. Really all this is for is just to make the ends of my pedal snake look neat. So once I've run all my cables through, I'll cut this to size, perhaps something like that, and then put it around the ends of my guitar pedal snake, and then tightens the end so it's not all fraying from that expandable braiding. It actually looks really nice and neat through this heat shrink wrapping. So that's essentially the parts that we're going to be using. Very, very cheap, very, very easy to do. So let's just now start building it. All right, so we've got ourselves a couple of leads here. You'll see that one of them is an L shape. Of course, we're going to have trouble getting this through the pedal snake because there's an odd shape right there. So we're going to be actually passing this end through the pedal snake. So we're going to pass all 4 cables through the actual sleeving at the same time. You'll see that just by pushing through here, I'll be able to feed all the cables through. It actually expands the cable sleeving, and then we'll figure out and clip this off at the end, and that's where we'll put the actual heat shrink wrapping to make it look nice and neat on one of the either ends. Now you can feed through 1 cable at a time if you so choose to, but it will get more and more difficult as you're trying to feed the next cable and the next cable through. So I generally recommend doing it all in the one shot. So just make sure that you've got all the cables that you need together at one point. It just makes it easier. So let's just go ahead and remove the cable ties off these DC cables. You'll see I've got my 2 guitar leads ready to go, and then making sure that your power is going the correct way because once you've fed it through, you may be stuck. So just make sure that the male and the female end are running through parallel to how you want the cabling to be on your pedal board with your guitar leads. Now, considering that this only expands to, this much, you can't put them all and bundle them together and feed them through like that because it will not fit. So just sort of position your cables in a way where there's ample room, something like that. Right, and that way you can start feeding them through nicely. What you can also do is you can also get yourself some gaffer tape, which I sometimes like to do, is cut into certain strips and then tape your cables down so that they stay in that particular order as you're feeding them through. This is completely optional. I sometimes have found that this is useful, so you can do that by taping it down all the way down through all of your bunch of cables. That way feeding them through, they don't come loose. So let's just pass the first cable. And literally all we're going to do is just going to push on the one end to make it bigger, like so. And then we're going to get the second cable in right behind it, like so. And then our power is right behind that. Okay, and just like a snake, essentially, hence the name, you've now got all the cables in here. And as we just continue to just expand it on one end, you just feed it through to the other end and it'll start picking up on this side and feeding through all of your cables. So the trick is to be patient, okay? Don't pass too much, say on this side, too quickly, because then you're going to have trouble feeding it through and pushing it back down so that it tightens on the other end. So just be patient, making sure that your cables are not getting tangled and out of order, because if your cables on this end start to go out of order, they're going to start to sort of loop themselves and it just will be difficult, more from a rolling up your pedal snake once you're completed. I just find it easier that way. All right, and then one end's about to pop out, the very first guitar lead. Okay, so both sides have now passed the heat shrink wrapping through and it looks better than it did. Now we're going to just apply some heat to this to actually get it to shrink into place, and it'll be much nicer after that. A heat gun would be preferred, but even if you just have a slight open flame over this, keeping it from a distance to make sure that you don't actually burn any of your cables you're sleeving, and most importantly, don't burn your house down. So here is the completed pedal snake. So a couple of cables through, the DC cables through, we've got it all nicely cabled through the braided sleeving here, and then the heat shrink wrapping on either end of the cable to sort of neaten it up, and it just looks a lot better than it did with all of the frayed ends. So very easy to make, very cheap, and I think it actually looks quite good. And then this way, I've just got it all in the one bundle rather than having all of my cables and my power all running through my pedal board out to my amp. So that is my video and my guide. Hopefully you found this helpful. As I said, it is fairly easy to do and fairly cheap as well. Just pop onto eBay, buy the parts. As long as you've got cables, you should be fine, your guitar cables, and that is really it. But either way, I would love it if you like this video. Please subscribe to Digital Stereo Guitar and click on the notification bell there to be up to date as I release new videos. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.